Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipschutz, managing editor of the National Newsroom at Lee, and co-host of the program, Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. And I hear we're going to Queens, right? New York? Queens, New York?
We're going to Queens, so different Queen. We're going into the jungle.
Oh.
The mighty jungle. And this is, you're going, oh, wow. A documentary, about animals, that would be my response. Okay, so this is me preemptively striking this thing. It is so fascinating because the National Geographic Channel has taken it's been 4 years to do this. And what they did was they looked at different species that have female-dominated situations. They also have a largely, I'm not saying it's 100%, but largely female behind-the-scenes team who photographed it, directed it, wrote it, did the music for it. I mean, they're all in. They're all in on this. But what's fascinating about it is the stories they're able to tell about how the animals react under different circumstances, how the dominance shows, what they're like at night when when we're not watching, apparently, what they do. So it's fascinating. And I don't think that there are 6 episodes of just all animals. And then there's a 7th, which is about how they made the whole thing. But the 6, you can easily see that there's room for more. So if they want to do Queens Part 2, we're in. We're there. And it's so fascinating. I got to see it when I was in California, and I've seen almost all of them. I have not seen, I think I'm missing one out of the bunch that I haven't seen. I did jump ahead to see the 7th. Because I wanted to see who these people were, and I wanted to see how they do. Because, really, you've heard about people going out on those photo safaris where they're out there shooting pictures, and you think they're going to be mauled. I've seen movies like this where they're dead, And I think there even was a scary one with Idris Elba.
You're right. I was just about to say, didn't he just do a movie about this?
Yeah. So you think, I want to see how they do this. But they're very good at kind of dealing with the animals. And they say, as long as you don't bother them, they don't care about you. You're not as important as you think you are. But for them, it was a real kind of crisis because it was done during the pandemic and they didn't have people available to them, to just fly over to Africa and do whatever.
Sure.
So they had to rely on locals. And the local aspect of all of this is what's so fascinating. And that's what's brought out in the last 7th edition of Queens, where you get to see how they use people. And it's interesting how when they talked, when they needed to get some information about the animals, they would talk to the women because the women would be more forthcoming and trying to help them to get the right kinds of shots they needed. Whereas the men all kind of were looking for something more. Maybe they wanted money in exchange for the information. The women wanted to help. And so I think they do tell a very big story about women in the world and what role they play. There even is a case, the bonobo, but this is a bonobo gorilla, are almost extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're worried about how do we get them back if we can kind of nurture them. And some women in Africa are actually serving as their surrogate mothers until they're good enough to get out on their own. And they'll hug them and play with them and do whatever they need to do to get them to that point, which is fascinating. I had no idea this was happening. But there's a story that led me to tears, and it was about this blind elephant. This blind elephant, they couldn't understand why it wasn't responding, and they then discovered that it was blind. And this one young woman who was part of their team, Faith is her name, Faith Musembi, she was a filmmaker in Kenya, but was never in charge of anything. And so they just watched her reacting with this elephant and thought, she has something here that we don't really know about. And what she learned that she was able to do was if she sang a song for this elephant, the elephant would come over to her and not be afraid. And the song she sang was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And they detail this kind of relationship she had with the elephant and what happens with their relationship. And that is so, so fascinating. When you see that, tears will fall. But Faith is their success story. Faith is the one that they said, you know what, we want you guys to have a stake in this. We want you to be able to make your own films. Normally, it's British filmmakers who come over and do nature films. They're the large kind of herd of people in this field. And so when they were doing Queens, they said, let's use her. And so they let her direct the 7th episode of Queens, which talks about how they made it and what they had to do and where everything went. And to me, the 7th episode is the most fascinating of all of them, because you get to see these animals romping around, and they have their little story where they give them names. It's very much like the Penguin movie, where they were all identified as characters.
Sure.
But this is one where you look at all these different animals, and then you see how they did it. And it's remarkable. They can get very close. They can get scared. There was one of the photographers who said that she was an expert in bear photography. And so she said, I always carry my bear spray with me just in case. But she said, how far you're able to go. People who tempt this are going to have trouble. So if the cocaine bear comes after us, all we needed was the bear spray, right?
Right.
And just treat the bear nicely, and we should be all right. But the whole thing is narrated by Angela Bassett, and come on, it doesn't get any better. If she doesn't win the Emmy right now for Best Narration, there is no justice in the Emmy Awards, because she is so good at telling this story. And you can get that little attitude out of her. She's great. She's really great. But there are 6 episodes that are various and sundry animals, and then the 7th is about the filmmakers themselves.
All right, Bruce, so you have an interview, right, with this?
Yeah, well, so I got Faith, and I have Sophie Darlington. Sophie was one of the leaders of the project. But here you'll get a chance to hear them, and you should be able to pick out who's Faith and who's Sophie in the process. Sophie is British, so you should be able to see who's who. This was so broad, so extensive. How do you even get your arms around doing a project like this?
We start with a massive hole in natural history, which is that it seems extraordinary to us, but there has never been a series made about female leadership in nature. And so there it was, ready and waiting, and it's something we'd all been passionately wanting to do for a long time.
Had you done a lot of filming that you just used the film, or then you go shoot exactly for this?
No, I mean, everything was from scratch because we had this ambition, and then just a crack team of researchers, scientists who came together to figure out what species do we film. We've got a wide array of potential characters, and then you go out, and then we've got the series, the directors of photography who determine how we're going to film, what's the style going to be like. So it's this whole machine that gets going.
It gets going. And Queens is what's unique about Queens is that it's also woman led. But that is not to say that we couldn't have done it without our incredible male allies. It's very much a cooperative, and it's very important because there's not a huge amount of people who look like Faith and myself involved in natural history, and we wanted to sort of, one of the best things and most important things about this series has been about not only showing the leadership in nature, but also behind the camera and behind the scenes in production.
I was surprised that you had to go to the women in the areas to get to the things that you needed to do, that they were better to talk to than the men.
Not better. Absolutely not better. It's just that we have... this is collaborative. This is not anyone's better than anyone else. I guess they were more willing to talk, but also it was the less seen. Mm-hmm. This series is not only about the amazing animals, and Queens is about the most wonderful stories, but it's also about Faith, Erin, and Faith's story. Actually, your story is the most incredible story.
But the women we worked through in the conservation groups, I think it's just because we've got just women who've stepped up in the different areas of influence and the expertise, and because of that, you also find people like me. I'm a local filmmaker from Kenya, and one of the episodes in Queens was filmed in Kenya. Traditionally, locals aren't involved in the making of premium wildlife content, which is kind of
bonkers.
It's crazy when you think, because Kenya doesn't have a shortage of wildlife films that are shot in Kenya, but you don't have locals who work on these projects.
It's been one of those things that people didn't think about. And we've been sitting there saying, at this moment in the world, with the climate crisis and with everything, why wouldn't you be using the voices that can tell their own stories? And Faith's story is that she came on as a producer on one of the episodes and ended up producing and directing the final episode herself, which is just stellar and something that we're all so thrilled about. The Behind the Queens.
Yeah, but Behind the Queens was my favorite one of all, and I'll tell you why it was. I wish it had been the first one, because I wanted to see the work that went into doing this. Mm-hmm. I thought that there was, how do you do this? To get those pictures, to worry about, are we safe? Mm-hmm. And I think that is the most telling episode of the whole series.
I agree.
So,
thank you.
Props to you. And I loved. Were you involved with the elephant one?
Yes. So just to give you a bit of context, so the elephant one is how I came on board the project, because it was filmed in Kenya, and I came on board as a field director. It was in the heart of the pandemic, where I think for the first time in history, no one could travel outside their country.
We zoomed. So, we did a lot of zooming.
Because I needed to, my background was in documentary filmmaking, but not premium wildlife. So I had to step up very quickly over a very short period of time. And the reason there was this gap where I had to step up is because up until, I think, this project, local filmmakers hadn't been used, because it was typically British people that would, because it's funded, a lot of projects are funded by the British public.
There's a huge history. There was an absolute history of natural history filmmaking that came out of Bristol, but what hadn't really seemed to occur, and it seemed like such an obvious move for Queen's, was that why wouldn't you have the voices from the countries you go to helping tell the stories?
Are you planning that there will be a lot going on and you'll be in charge of all? Or
we hope
yes,
so.
Please.
I mean, maybe not in charge, but in collaboration.
No, she's producing, directing her next project for National Geographic. It's all good.
but it's I think the beauty of the process was showing it's possible, because I think there was this genuine fear, if we stop making these films how they've been made, that it's going to somehow ruin what's happening. But I think with what we've shown is it actually makes the product stronger.
So
it gives it a different feel, and it just opens up this world of possibilities. Like, yes, you can use locals. Yes, you can still use the people who've traditionally made this stuff. We can all work together. And it's been such a joy for me, to be given an opportunity and to thrive, because I've had people like Sophie. Actually, a little story about Sophie, when I first heard that I'd be working with her, and this was like 3 years ago, it was unbelievable, because she's a bit of a legend in natural history filmmaking. People know her. She's been doing this for a long time. And I was freaking out. I was thinking, there's no way this is real. So I thought, they're saying it's going to happen. It's probably not going to happen. And then it happened. So
we met, and there was an amazing moment where we got to meet out in Amboseli, and I, as the series director of photography, as one of them, we'd been talking about style and content, but to actually be out there with the elephants, seeing the elephants, there was an amazing moment in the film where Faith introduced me to Selenge, the elephant that is blind, and it was only through Faith's knowledge and her powers of observation, but also the fact that she knew the researchers. You had this in for us. It made the project so much stronger to include. And I feel like Queen's is so much stronger for that. I'm so delighted, because
it's so surreal.
It's worked.
To think how far we've come.
It shows the hard work. And I want to see your name on every project.
So do I.
Yeah.
You will.
Thanks, Bruce, for that interview. It sounds like an interesting show. What else can you share about this one?
What's interesting is there's a story. Each one has a story. And they do a kind of an outline of what they're looking for, the kind of shots they're looking for, but it doesn't always track. And if the animals aren't in on this, they're not playing the game. If they don't match what the agenda is, you change the agenda. And so you try to figure out, now we need to get a lion blinking here. Okay, so when you're out there, get a lion blinking. We need that. And if it doesn't, they rewrite it. But then they end up, by the time they get all of this footage put together, they've got to do the scoring. And what kind of music do you put with it? Well, they hired Morgan Kibbe, and Morgan does a lot of electronic music. Mm-hmm. And she said that if it's 50 minutes long, 49 minutes of it is music. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. You're not sure what kind of music you're going to put underneath it. So it is just a real game with all of this. You could end up with nothing if you tried. You know, you could go out there and say, gee, the animals just weren't doing anything today, and we got nothing for you. And then you come back and you think, wait a minute, we've got to fill an hour with this. What are we going to do? So, yeah, it's a real collaborative process. And they are talking to all of their different photographers out in the field. And if you're looking at the magazine, National Geographic, remember that? There's actually a magazine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, this month they do a special edition about Queens, and you get to see how they shot the pictures of the hyenas.
Wow.
And it was fun to see their infrared cameras and all that kind of good stuff. But it's rare that you get that close to hyenas. They are not social with humans. So just know the Lion King was right, but they're smart. They're smarter than you think. So don't think they're dumb like a couple of other guys in the animated movie. Hyenas are smart.
They're smart. They're scrappy too.
Scrappy, and I wouldn't want to get in a fight with them.
Nope.
Nor would I want to get near the lions. The elephants also can be a little less than social. So, be careful if you're out there. Yeah. And I said, well, what do you think of those people who go on these safaris? You know how you hear friends who say, oh, we're going on a safari. We're going to shoot pictures of animals. Disney World is as close as I'll ever get to that because I A, can't afford it, and B, I don't like to rough it. So that's not happening, and I don't want to be mauled by a bear.
Yeah, we were went out to the Badlands, South Dakota this past summer, and one of
they
the
have
stops,
bear country.
We went to bear country, yep, and we were driving around, and
they come up to your car.
Exactly. So I'm just thinking, please don't scratch the paint.
That's exactly what I was worried about. I said, well, walk through this. I would rather have them scratch me than ruin the paint on the car. Shouldn't there be some kind of vehicle that they take you out in?
Right.
So that we wouldn't have that problem? I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
it was fun, though. It was neat to drive through, and they have that kind of enclosure. It's because they have to separate the little bears because they get the cubs, because some of the parents get territorial and they're worried about them killing each other, so they separate the cubs for a little while, and they're so cute. They're just rolling around and playing with each other, and you're like, oh, look at those cute little bears.
They like me. They really
years
like
from there,
me.
they're gonna tear your face off.
Which one has the cocaine?
Which one has the cocaine?
That's what we have to worry about. But watch this, because this is, I think, one of those good. David Attenborough does a lot of really great ones too.
Yeah.
And this is one of those documentaries that I did not say, oh, I got to watch this. It was one I really enjoyed. And I thought it moved like a house on fire, and it had a lot of stories to tell and things I did not know. I learned a lot of things about animals that I had no idea that was a part of it. But do watch this, and it starts in March. You'll be able to see all the episodes. But coming next week, Terry.
What's that?
It's
what do we
week
have?
Of all weeks for us. I mean, it's my Super Bowl. It's my, World Series. It's my NBA Finals. It's all of that rolled into one. It's Oscar week.
Oh, it's Oscar week. It's here already.
Yeah, we've only been talking about Barbie and Oppenheimer for what? 6 months?
I cannot wait to talk about something other than those two movies.
And you know what? It could be a really interesting night, but we won't talk about predictions until next week. Have you seen everything yet?
I have not.
Terry,
I have got some work. What do I do in my spare time?
You're watching that crap. You're watching things like Tokyo Vice, and you don't.
I'm watching Tokyo Vice.
You watch something else.
I should. So Tokyo Vice came under I've got to be careful when I watch it because so much of it has subtitles. So I started watching the first episode the other night. It's season 2. I watched the first season and I really enjoyed it. So I started watching season 2 the other night, and I got maybe halfway through it, and the eyelids were getting a little bit heavy, and I had to stop and rewind briefly because I missed something, and that's when I knew it's time to turn it off because I cannot continue to read.
When the reading is difficult, it's time to stop. Did you watch the Screen Actors Guild Awards on Netflix?
I did not. I heard about them, and that's kind of why we'll stay away from the predictions. But this is again Oppenheimer pretty much cleaned up, right?
Well, look what happened too. They were not censored, so it's not like the Oscars or any of the other ones. And they were dropping words that you would not believe. So if the kids were in the other room, just know it's not one to watch with the whole family.
Yeah. That's what we need. Now in this world, it is kind of interesting when you think about it because there's so many streaming options now. And with so many of these programs being simulcast on multiple things, if CBS decides to air it, that's fine. But they could air an uncensored version on their streaming service if they really wanted to. Because
I believe they have.
Have they? I haven't paid that close attention. So yeah, I mean, we're entering a new world where, the broadcast limitations are going away. If that's what you have and that's all you're going to watch it off of, that's fine, but you can get an alternate view. It's sort of like if you're watching Monday Night Football on ESPN, you can go to ESPN2 and watch the Manning cast and turn off the regular play-by-play folks and listen to Peyton and Eli weigh in and have some fun.
And are they ones who will drop certain words?
No, they keep it pretty clean. I mean, they are the Manning family. I mean, it's wholesome.
I got stuck one time with one of those, press this for kid friendly. Never press that button because you end up not getting all the words in some of these things. And I'll be the judge of me. So next big Oscar week,
it is.
It's Queens week after that. Be ready.
All right. And then speaking of Queens, my New York Mets are back in action. Spring training has started and the season is already over.
Oh no.
Kodai Senga is hurt, which means we're already done. There's that little snippet from Family Guy, the where Stewie says it's worse than being a Mets fan, and it cuts away where it's there's a fly ball to start the season and the season's over. It's one of those. So it's already
you've got to take a page from the Cubs.
I know. I got to find a better team, but
the Cubs are better at dealing with. Yeah. So one last question before we leave.
Sure.
What do you think of the uniforms? This whole big controversy about what is this?
So I have daughters, right? And obviously there's girls are playing sports, boys are playing sports, and some of the things that you look at differently now that I'm a dad of daughters that play sports. So the big controversy, of course, are the see-through pants, like this new moisture-wicking material, and you can see through them. It's pretty obvious. But my wife shows me, it's like a meme that was floating around social media, which it's like everybody's complaining about the pants, the see-through pants, and then next to it shows like a women's volleyball team. Have you ever seen the short shorts that the volleyball players wear?
Yeah.
They're very revealing, and it's the ones where even my daughters who play volleyball, they don't wear those shorts.
Not good.
No.
So you don't like the new baseball uniforms?
There's the saying, like, there's many hills we'll die on, but that's not one of them. Other than the fact that they seem to be see-through, I don't see what the big deal is about them. I know they're talking about the names on the uniforms are smaller and this, that, and the other. I'm not a Major League Baseball player, so it's not something that bothers me. I guess they're making big bucks. I hope that they're comfortable for them, and they should be comfortable to play in. So that's, as long as that's mission accomplished, then I guess fine. There's been some complaints because normally they tailor the uniforms. Like first week of spring training, they go in, they send in people with the tape measures and try to customize it to your body's type and your likes, and whether you like it snug or loose or long or short. And I guess they really trimmed back on those options this year, and some of the players have been upset. And I don't know, you're paying a guy $20 million a year. Yeah, get the tailor in, whatever makes him happy, as long as he's pitching and winning. That's all that matters.
Let's start with the Mets, right?
Let's win a few games and we'll be happy. Make Terry happy. Enough about baseball. This is an entertainment podcast. We will be back again next week with another episode of Stream to Screen, reviewing the Oscars. Until then, thanks for listening.